Hello guys and welcome in. Today is going to be our introductory video for ESO Logs. This is an amazing tool available to all PC players. While it is an amazing tool, it is also potentially very overwhelming for people just starting out their ESO log journey. This is why, in this new series I'm starting up, we're going to be doing a deep dive into specific elements to better understand the data that you can gain from ESO logs. But before we start our deep dive, an overview of ESO log basics is in order. If you are looking for information on how to set up and start collecting ESO logs, on the homepage of ESO Logs website, you can find information on how to get started. Seeing as how they already have a clear-cut guide here on how to set up your ESO Logs account, the in-game settings, setting up the log upload client, and how to upload to the website, I will not be going over these elements. In today's video, we're going to do an introductory overview for the various elements of an ESO log, and generally discuss what types of information you can garner from an ESO log. Without further ado, let's dive in. So once you've either got your ESO log properly set up, or you look at one that somebody else ran, you get a page that looks like this, if the log was for a trial. You're going to have the option for all encounters, which gives you everything the log picked up while it was running, or you can instead select between bosses from that trial. Then at the very bottom, you're going to have the different trash packs. For today's overview, we are going to be taking a look specifically at this Warrior Veteran hard mode. Regardless of which fight you pick, the format of the page will remain the same, and the way to find information will be consistent. The default page you are taken to upon selecting the boss is the Summary tab. The first graphic on the Summary page is a quick overview of the whole fight, with the amount of time being the x-axis, units per second amount on the y-axis. The lines on the graph are the blue indicates damage done, red indicates damage taken, and green indicates healing done. The graphs give a good first impression of how the fight went, but more detailed information is covered in other tabs, which we will cover later in this video. The next thing you're going to see is the raid composition. This is not determined by your in-game alignment for role, but instead is determined by general factors such as how much damage received, how much healing done, and how much damage done by that player throughout the fight. So sometimes you'll see something a little odd like 3 tanks listed, when there was only ever 2 tanks. The next section you're going to see is damage done by source. This just gives the overall damage done by a particular player throughout the duration of the fight, and the average damage per second. The next box is healing done by source. Again, overall healing done throughout the fight, followed by healing per second. The next section is damage taken organized by ability, with the abilities being specific skills from enemies that you are going to encounter. And this is where having familiarity with the fights and knowing what the names of certain incoming attacks are will help you with identifying where your group is taking the most damage. To the right of this, we have the deaths section. This will show the player what the killing blow and exactly what time they died. Then finally, in the last section here on the summary page, you'll be able to see what gear and skills players were using during the fight. And this was a good starting point for your investigation into ESO logs. For today, we're going to continue with a general overview of easy information you can pick up at first glance at each tab. So continuing on, the second tab labeled is damage done. This shows you the same as we saw in the summary page, with the overall damage per player throughout the fight followed with the damage per second average of the fight. From this information, you can further refine it based on the source or player that was doing damage by selecting a player name from this dropdown. Additionally, you can refine it by what enemies were taking damage by this dropdown. And you can even refine what abilities were doing damage by this drop-down section. Learning how to refine your view on ESO Logs will help you garner more informative data. It's important to then go through and remove these filters by selecting this X. Once you're done looking at specific information, or if you want to back out and view a different player or variable. Next, we have damage taken. The default view is damage taken by players. And again, you can do the same filtering of specific players, specific sources that the damage was received from, and specific abilities. Sometimes you'll see something a little odd, such as a flame shaper was receiving damage taken, and sometimes that just happens when you use something in the fight itself to hurt an enemy. That's where filtering out and showing potentially just a single player that you're interested in is very helpful to understand what sources of damage taken are the heaviest hitters. And again, we're going to remove that filter before moving on to the next tab of healing. Healing will show the amount of normal healing and absorbed healing as the total heals per second. Absorb refers to damage shields that were used to take damage instead of your health bar, while normal healing is what you would think of with the healing that is done for a player that is below 100%. It is that rejuvenation of health. An important element to toggle on and off for the healing tab is the one right here, called Overheal. Overhealing is a huge part of the Elder Scrolls Online, unlike other MMOs where overhealing is frowned upon. Overhealing is useful to proc sets such as Spell Power Cure. So you will want to toggle overhealing on to get a better view of the raw heals per second provided by those healers. It can also be a good comparison to see where potentially a healer could work more on buff and debuff uptime instead of raw healing at certain points throughout the fight. The next tab we have is Threat. Threat is not a commonly used tab, but is something that can be very helpful when first starting to understand fights, as it can show you where certain enemies appear and also which tank has aggro of that enemy. What you see if a tank loses taunt. In this case, let's look at the main boss of this fight, the warrior. When a tank loses taunt, you're going to see less than 100% uptime for them having threat. And this is either because your tank died, they let taunt drop, or they never had the enemy taunted in the first place, as potential reasons why this would be less than 100%. Additionally, on this page, it will list which enemy it is here underneath the player that had threat or taunt here, and it's divided out by player for each of these boxes. This is a good tool for determining if it was a mechanic that killed you, because sometimes bosses turn around and look at group even though the tank still has taunt and the enemy is doing a mechanic, or the tank actually lost taunt and you just got booped by the boss. The next tab that we're going to talk about is Buffs. Buffs is an information-dense tab that players of any role can benefit from learning how to read. From this page, you can see every buff that was applied by every player throughout the fight, from manually applied buffs such as Warhorn to passive buffs such as minor Aegis from gear. The name of the buff is followed by the percentage uptime throughout the fight. The buffs are organized by major group cooldown, meaning a buff applied to many by one person. Then major individual cooldown, meaning a buff applied to one person by one person. Then we have damage buffs, defensive buffs, healing buffs, movement buffs, raid buffs, stances, forms, and seals, toy buffs, and finally uncategorized buffs. If you're looking for a specific buff, Control F is your friend. This page is an information overload that I will do deeper dives into in the future videos, breaking down a specific element and how to understand the raw data. If you have an element that you would like me to cover first, make sure to comment on the video and review comments from others and like the ones you're interested in. The most liked requests will be bumped up on the video list. For today, we're going to leave it at this very superficial view of buffs because there is so much information here. I want to know what you guys want to know the most so I can really focus on those details and give you the best breakdown for those instead of trying to oversimplify everything. The next tab we're going to talk about is debuffs. The default view for this page will show debuffs applied to friendlies. While this is potentially useful information, the more common use of this tab is to see the debuffs players apply. So you're going to want to toggle here to enemies to see the debuffs applied by players to enemies. After that, it shows the name of the debuff, followed by the percentage uptime throughout the fight. And this is a much shorter list than buffs. But again, Control F is going to be your friend for finding the buffs you are most interested in. And again, also you can refine by the enemies themselves. If you want to know which player applied buffs, you're going to want to select sources here, and then potentially abilities that applied that debuff from that player here to further refine your view. The next tab we have is deaths. This is a more in-depth view than what we saw on the summary page. The summary only showed you the very last skill that killed that player and the time it happened. What we can view here is the time that the player died, the final killing blow, and additionally, it can show you over how long it took to kill that player, and if there was more than one hit of that attack before it killed the person. This is useful to know if there was a one-shot attack, or if it was something over a period of time, or just a really unlucky combination of attacks. This is helpful for all players to get a better understanding of what they died from, when they died from it, and see overall how it was affecting everybody else in the group. After that, we have the tab Interrupts. This is more prevalent in fights such as Asylum Sanctorium, where a specific player is actually assigned to interrupt the boss, Saint Lothis the Pious, during his channeled poison attack called Defile Blast. On this tab, the information is organized by channeled attack. You can see what attacks were stopped, by who they were stopped by, and which attacks were missed and therefore never interrupted, and who was affected by the damage of that uninterrupted attack. Next on the list, we have Dispels. I like to think of it as these are attacks or debuffs applied to the player from an enemy due to mechanics that potentially the player could avoid in some cases, but not always. In this case, the Warrior Leap is a mechanic that the boss does when the player gets too far away from him. So therefore, a player triggers this mechanic and it can target on somebody. So it is dispelled, and then you can also see if the player missed it by, say, roll dodging away. In the case of a more complicated fight with Dispels, such as Rockgrove Hard Mode's Flame Herald Basai, you're going to see the curse mechanic, where the main tank receiving curse is a choice by whoever chooses to get taunt on the main boss. And then there's also the choice of who gets curse ground by whoever is the two furthest people away from Basai, and additionally the choice of who gets hamstrung by who taunts the Flesh Abomination or Fire Behemoth, and so on and so forth. Going back to our original log, the next tab we have is Resources. The default resource shown is going to be health of your allies. And at its default setting, this tab is not very helpful. What's more useful is to refine by selecting a specific player here that you're interested in. You would want to look at resources such as Magicka or Stamina, which you can select here. Or if you want to investigate further on if the player is optimally using their ultimate. You can look and see the amount of ultimate, and under these settings you can see all of the sources from which that resource is gained from, down below the graph. And again, you're going to want to remove that filter before moving on to the next tab, which is casts. This will show you all players' casts per minute from the highest to lowest. Then you refine it here to see specific players, and you can see what their most cast skills, skill abilities, or actions were throughout the fight. Something that we hadn't discussed yet, but timelines right here is a different way to visualize the same data. For a cast to see exactly when certain skills were cast in relation to each other. Viewing the timeline, it's helpful to see if you're getting your light attack weaving in between your different skill cast, and overall useful to see what inputs a player is doing in a timeline-based breakdown. Expanding on different ways to view the same data, we additionally have events, which will, in giving all data for a tab in a numerical timeline instead of a visual one. This view is not commonly used, as many prefer a more graphical approach to ESO log analysis. But when you're getting into the nitty-gritty and you're trying to figure out what exactly happened at second 36 of the fight, this is very helpful for knowing exactly down to the thousandth of a second what actions were going on in the fight. So this is where one of those instances where ESO log can give you so much information if you know how to use it. And with that, we have our first introductory video for ESO logs. And again, this is a very superficial guide to understanding ESO logs. My hope is that you all will help me fill in a curation of video discussions about ESO logs with more and more details as we explore the elements that interest you the most. Comment down below this video to directly let me know what you want for these videos. I plan to keep doing them on a regular basis, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. Thank you all so much for sticking around to the end. If you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe so you know when the next one is going to go live. I post a variety of Elder Scrolls Online content, from beginner friendly to gold making to updates about upcoming events. If you want to hang out with us some more, we are live multiple nights a week over on Twitch, so you can come check us out over there. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Bye!